Cool. Well, I'm excited to welcome everybody here. This is the first experiment of many, I hope, in which we talk to each other, I guess. We're already talking to each other in many different forms, on Spaces, on Telegrams, on Discords. And one of the ideas that came up in one of the spaces that Stephanie was hosting was, why don't we have a joint design session where we basically hear from different people in the community, but what they're building, and specifically what they're interested in other people to either adopt or to integrate with, so that we can have more different types of standards for music on Web3. So each and everyone here is building something different in different variations, trying to solve different problems. And the point of these sessions, we're going to have between 2 and 4 people in each session, usually between 15 and 30 minutes for each person, to share some of their current designs and implementations, in the hope that we're going to find commonality between us, and everyone's going to get a chance to ask questions and to see whether we're trying to build the same thing in different ways, or maybe we have a common design pattern that we can then take, adopt, and then maybe create an EIP from, or other things. And either way, we're gonna create connections and learn from each other. And the worst case scenario, we learn a bunch of stuff. Best case scenario, we actually start maybe even integrating and creating this ecosystem of things that work together. So I'm excited. Our first presenter today is going to be Bruno. I'll just say that I got to know Bruno at his work in Revelator, and I've been since I've been researching the Web3 space and blockchain and trying to change music, and I've seen Bruno's name splattered all over these attempts over the past probably more than 6-7 years in the blockchain space that I know of, and many more years in the music space. And it's kind of an honor for me to have Bruno talk here and talk about what Revelator is building, and specifically maybe how we can find a common way to integrate with what they're building and what they're trying to solve. So Bruno, it's really up to you what you want to show. I'm happy with it being, I think everyone here is also looking for a little bit of technical as well, not just proposed philosophy, but specifically integration points, and we can even make it relatively technical, like showing JSON structures, contracts, or signatures, or anything like that. And we'll just keep the conversation open. Probably, let's say 15 or 20 minutes of showing stuff, and then 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Cool. So let me just make sure you can present. You should have the ability to present. The floor is yours. May the force be with you.
All right. So let me first give you some context real quick as to what we're doing, right? So we're building a protocol for music IP. And the idea is to bring music rights and royalty on chain, right? So music, streaming royalties coming that are currently off chain, and kind of bringing those on chain. Okay. The way we think about this is, Revelator is a B2B service. So we provide solutions and platform for record labels, artist management companies, and music distributors that serve probably close to 250,000 artists today through all of our direct customers. The way we think about the protocol is, a music label, a distributor, an artist manager, generally, we can consider them oracles. They're sitting on a source of truth as to the rights holders they work with and the royalties they collect and pay out. So oracles are a big component of this protocol. So you have the music rights holders creating assets, and the distributors getting paid, collecting money from the music platforms, and then being able to kind of make those payments and register those assets into smart contracts. That's what we call an OMA, which is an original works media asset, ultimately. At that point, anyone with their pro rata share, of an asset can do whatever they want on a non-custodial basis with that, whether it's, listing it or accessing, DeFi protocols or financial products or lending. So it's basically having a source of truth in a contract that people can do whatever they want with. Okay. So now let me kind of go to the okay. So the way we go about it ourselves, we start with a platform, a music-based platform, where we manage, revenue and distribution across all the DSPs. We manage the music assets as well. We tokenize these assets, so we can easily, take an asset and register it directly on chain, just as easily as scanning a QR code and turning that into a smart contract. And we would do that with the wallet on the left. So the wallet, you can actually scan and register an asset, and the moment you do that, you end up with a registered asset. So you've got an asset here that's that was a song and is now a token, a smart contract. This is an ERC20, and in that smart contract, you can record rights and royalties, and you can see all the rights holders connected to that asset. Okay. Now this also has a web component, so you can easily, one second. You can easily go into the asset on the web app and be able to look at the rights holders as well as see all the transfer history and the activity. So once we've made the link between Revelator as the royalty platform, where music royalties are collected, and now we've got the smart contract, this asset actually now has pretty much everything we need to make payments to. So we know we have 11 rights holders. These are the wallet addresses, their share percentage, and the moment we make a payment to this smart contract, then all 11 people are going to get paid. So this is the way we bridge basically from Web 2 to Web 3. Okay. When we say bridge, basically are moving metadata, right? So in this case, this is the contract address of that asset, and we've structured all that metadata to go along with the information. So the moment we make a royalty payment, there's two types of fact sheets. This metadata is what we call the asset fact sheet, and the moment we point a payment to the smart contract, that's what we call a financial fact sheet. So in this case, on the asset fact sheet, everything that's within the UI and within the information here, whether it's the main details, which may include a UPC, which we might also have all the track level information with the ISRCs as well for the different remixes. And we may have other details as well as to a release date, perhaps, or who controls it, the label, the copyright, etc. So all that is coming from the JSON structure that the Revelator platform passes as it registers the asset. So when we basically create the smart contract, we bring over all this information. And this information is accessible both on the web and on the mobile. And ultimately, we have the same information. What chain it's connected to, the contract address, the ID in Revelator, the artists and the copyright, etc., and who, what rights are registered on chain and who the rights holders are. So once we have that, this is basically all of my different assets that are connected, to my wallet. In this case, I can kind of see the whole structure of the metadata that's connected to this asset. That makes it easy for us to pass, all the relevant information. Now, we have a unique situation in that, Revelator is a music distributor. So it's very easy for us to, distribute to DSPs. And what that means is that when we distribute to a DSPs, we're actually passing, to all the DSPs we distribute to, all the dApps package of that album, right? So what we're thinking now, obviously having, all the information at the track level, at the localization level, at the metadata level, all this information is going to be part of the dApps package that makes it to the DSP. So what we're thinking now is, as part of being involved in the dApps working group for metadata standards, we're trying to think about, can we enrich our fact sheet so that when we register, the asset on chain, we're actually bringing more than what we've currently thought about, but actually bring the whole dApps package metadata and kind of connect it to that smart contract address. That will put us in a position where, every time we distribute an asset to the music supply chain, we're able to also make sure all of that metadata and dApps package is registered on chain. At that point, then, we'll have a lot more metadata, not just in terms of the credits and the track list and the ISRCs, et cetera, but also where it's being distributed to as well. So that's what I can share with you today. And happy to, get some feedback from you guys and hear your thoughts.
Oh, this is great. Thank you for this. Did I understand correctly that using your platform as an artist, the music will get distributed to both Web2 and Web3 DSPs? And if so, how do you validate that the music is legitimately owned by the people submitting it?
Sure. I mean, you bring up a good point. Most distributors deal with fraud, to different extents, but different distributors have different practices or systems in place to deal with three types of fraud: content infringement or copyright infringement, artificial streaming, and then YouTube scams. So that's part of our supply chain processes, right? We have what we call a metadata inspector that allows us to, and our customers as well, to inspect metadata before it reaches the supply chain, right? Where we're actually able to, we use ACR Cloud as a way to detect copyright infringements, things like that. So we can see if there's a reference overlap on an existing asset, audio fingerprint and things like that. Some fraud will get through. There's, it's just the reality of a messy supply chain. But every distributor has to do their own part in making sure that they verify the content before it reaches, the DSPs. There is some work going on right now in different aggregators and distributors coming together to fight fraud on a more collective basis, which is great. And sharing information around different bad actors moving from one distributor to the other, trying to get the system. And we're involved with that, with the different distributors coming together to try to put an end to that. But ultimately, I don't think it's, you'll get to 100% fail safe on fraud. It's just the reality. So what you have to do is, you have to do KYC and KYB basically. We work with B2B, so we work with businesses like distributors and labels. And we know them, we work with them, right? So we do a lot of pre-qualification when we sign up a new label or distributor to work with us, and make sure that we validate their content and their artists, et cetera. Even though we know, they may start legit and then they may have one bad artist, uploading stuff. That's just nothing you can do about that. But we give them the tools to inspect the metadata and the best practices to kind of deal with it. So there's different ways of dealing with it. Obviously, one is before it reaches the supply chain. And secondly, it's when you look at the analytics and you can kind of look at the quantities of streams and see if you can detect anomalies or patterns that lead to artificial streaming recognition. But when it comes to recording an asset on chain, you have to trust the parties you work with, right? There's no way around that. I don't think you'll ever get to a trustless system, but you can only put measures in place that improves the validity of the people you're working with. So you're going to ask them for Spotify ID, Apple ID, potentially ISNI, different identifiers to see if they're real people, right? If they actually have real profiles. In the case of publishing, you're asking them for IPIs, numbers, and making sure that they have affiliation with societies. So that at least gives more credibility to who they are. And you have ways of detecting, on those rights organizations or society websites, if they have an IPI number, most likely, you can track it down and make sure they say who they are, who they say they are. But ultimately, I don't think we can solve fraud. That's a whole discussion in itself. I think what we have to kind of think about is, let's assume that we're working with, assets that come from legitimate labels. How do we deal with bringing that metadata on chain, right? So part of what I showed you today is we deal with it in two forms. One is the asset, metadata, what we call a fact sheet, and the other is the financial fact sheet, which is really the payment transaction to that asset. And what information do we pass when we're making the payment to that asset? In the case of a royalty,
Let me just ask a payment-related question. So in the asset, is it the artist or the DSP that sets the compensation per play in your model, and kind of how does that evolve, and does it get renegotiated over time, and is it fungible?
So the DSPs are the ones that set the rates, with all the labels and distributors they work with, right?
And for an independent, how does that?
Same thing.
Merlin.
Yeah. Independents will go through a distributor, right? There is no independent artist that's uploading directly to a DSP, unless you think about SoundCloud or YouTube, but they're the only ones right now, or even TikTok, since they just announced their distribution platform. But ultimately, I think, independents are always going to have to deal with distributors. And the distributors are the ones that have the relationship and contract with the DSPs. So they're collecting and they're paying it out, right? Our situation is a little different because we're not only a distributor, but we're also a platform for distributors. So, many distributors, about 115 of them, use our platform to manage all their rights holders and all their supply chain and all their royalties, right? Without us being part of that, right? Where in that case, we're just a platform.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and in that sense, I think it's important. Hi, I'm Gilad. I work with Bruno at Revelator, so I was putting some kids to bed, so I jumped in a bit late. But in general, I think it's very important to have that distinction between the distribution part of the service, which essentially is responsible for the anti-fraud and responsible for stating what music they distribute to the DSPs. And as Bruno said, fraud is not, at the end, fraud is determined in court, and it's not something we can kind of automate. But giving the immutable record of what a distributor said is something that the protocol doesn't care in terms of legitimacy. What it can show is the record of what the distributor claimed, and if the asset is deemed to be essentially a theft or whatever, then the DSP will stop making payments to that asset. So the protocol is agnostic, but Revelator as a distributor obviously has all these layers. And for our distribution customers, they also, we provide them with tools. But essentially, that's part of the decentralization of the protocol, where we provide the technology stack to put assets on chain, but we use our own relayer with our permissioned customers that are distributors, and we know who we work with and what transactions we enable. But since the code is open source, anybody can spin up their own relayer and have other music distributors use their own UI, which we're not party to, but the protocol is providing that kind of as a public good.
Yeah, and actually I am that use case for you, precisely, because I do not want to deal with authenticating music. I don't want to deal with negotiating rates, right? I just
there are other businesses that do that, but you want to bring them on chain. You want to bring them.
I want the library with all the terms and focus on the user experience, right? And because that's, you know, and you know, I don't know who's next, but when when it's my turn, I'll kind of share more.
Cool.
You're next.
Perfect timing. That was just a great buildup.
Yeah, I just need 1 second to pull up.
Sure.
Ivan, let me just make sure. Does anybody else have questions?
Can I ask one question in the meantime when you pull up to Bruno?
Please, I need a few minutes.
Sure, sure.
So you mentioned the OMA, the own music asset. Can you say something about this identifier? So that is most certainly of interest to me, because I think the ISCC could be of interest in this case or in this situation. And the other question is quite a boring one, which is like you mentioned the smart contract, and there will be a payment to a specific address, and then the revenue split will happen. Do you see any regulatory requirements regarding receipts, invoices, like VAT, like this stuff? So it's not a typical question of maybe, but I'm interested in how the accounting side is, that if once you're dealing with like legacy music distributors and companies.
At the end of the day, you know, we look at it as a payment method, right? So whether you choose to get paid through PayPal or to your bank account or on chain, it's still just a payment, you know, preference. So that shouldn't affect the regular accounting practices that you have as a business. You're still gonna, you know, make a royalty statement to somebody, right? And you're still gonna be able to make a payment against that royalty statement. And generally, you're gonna create an invoice and you're gonna make a payment against that invoice.
I was just asking because Web3 seemed to me like the use case where you can do business with parties that you don't know, and that where you don't have an address and where you don't know the VAT number and these kind of things. So it's if it's like a business between, especially in B2B, between parties who know each other anyhow and do business anyhow.
Correct.
So
that is our use case. You know, we're serving B2B customers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we, you know, they pay us, we pay them, you know, we issue invoices and, you know, payments. So in our case, I think that's pretty easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
In a case
Web3, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just to add on that, what Web3 solves for us is how our customers distribute the money forward that they get, the payments that they get for us. So it's immediately reconciled based on their ongoing adjustments without the need for accounting. So the accounting essentially is what they do, but it's immediate transfer of data and value between them, and that's what we use Web3 for.
As one of my artist friends said, what they love about Web3 is that they don't have to beg the label company for a paycheck. And
when the label gets it, it immediately flows.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's really good news.
Stephanie? You're muted.
We're not hearing you.
Sorry. I have a baby in the background, so I try not to be unmuted. But how is provenance handled here? Is the asset tied to one party or multiple parties from the beginning? Or is this something that happens after the fact just for royalty payments?
So generally, you know, one person will be the administrator, you know, and upload their content. But when they do that, you know, they're creating a contract and they're inviting all the different rights holders that are participants in that income stream or that copyright. So it's usually one person doing the upload and then assigning a contract and inviting all the different rights holders in that contract. The moment the smart contract is created, obviously, we're doing it through an ERC20, so it's fungible and rights can be transferred and shared with other parties. At that point, we don't really know, who I may be transferring shares to Gilad, and Gilad may be transferring shares, to Sam or Justin, right? At that point, we won't know.
Got it. Okay, that might be something to consider, to have like a split provenance, just so we have a registration of who the creators are.
You do, the moment you have the asset registered on chain and you have the original participants. But because they're non-custodial, each one of us is holding tokens in our own wallets. So, because it's non-custodial, you can decide to do whatever you want with it, right? So while you may know the original, income participants or rights holders to the track, it doesn't, mean that somebody else is going to get added later on.
We only have a couple
That's
more
part
minutes
of the-
left.
Oh, sorry.
So let me just make sure that I get one last thing from Bruno here. Bruno, thank you. So is there maybe that's something we should ask everybody, every presenter. Do you have a specific ask from the builder community on what you would like to see us all either try or integrate with, or do you want to share maybe links to the structures of the JSON files that you mentioned here? So what would be a definition of success for this meeting from your point of view with everybody here? What would you like the community to do with the information that you shared?
I didn't really think about it before you just asked a question, so I'm prepared to answer really quick off the top of my head. Gilad, do you have any ideas of what we would like to see?
Well, we definitely would like. I was just texting with Sebastian right now about that exactly. I think as many use cases that might be relevant, because we're building this protocol indeed as an open source and a construct to allow any music application, even if it's unrelated to Revelator, just to try and bridge between the legacy distribution, collections, and payments, and optimize payment flows. So any use case or application that you can imagine being built on top of an OMA, this original media asset, we'd be happy to share, kind of see how we're trying to be as general as possible. So as many use cases we encounter that we can cater for, the happier we are. So yeah, drop your email and we can continue the conversation or start working groups if we have enough interested parties.
You can also drop your emails here in the chat, and then people can contact you to maybe start talking about it. I personally would also love to see, maybe you have like a public repo of just the data structures that Bruno showed, or something that we can have a reference for, because otherwise I'm going to have to look at the recording and look at the structure just to understand. But obviously that structure seems pretty important to me in terms of integration, right?
Of course. I think before we kind of put it out, we're really in final stages of internal kind of validations. As Bruno also talked about, we're talking with dApps, with the working group of dApps. So changes might be there, but it can definitely have let's say a public version, which we're comfortable as the basis. So we have to clean it up a bit, but that's definitely something we wanted to roll out this quarter anyway. So I'll drop my email here, and definitely we can, if everybody's interested, we can reach out once we have that public data available.
Just drop it and call it an alpha. That's my recommendation. It's never going to be done. Sebastian, one last thing before we finish.
It's a last question regarding the community effort that we are going to undertake here. So this the smart contracts or that deal with split payments, and so is that something that is a common infrastructure already in your let's say the music and Web3 space, or is that something so easy and generic that it's not worth discussing about whether we can come up with some kind of a standard for this kind of improvement proposal, or however smart contract that will kind of that people can use actually. So is that open source? Is that I know like
Yeah,
25 projects who are dealing with split payments, and probably all of them are doing it in a different way. That's basically the idea of these calls, I would assume, to kind of find a common ground for some technical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I know of 5 or 6 different projects that are doing splits. You know, we've been developing this since 2018. And so we have our own way of doing it as well. You know, all of it is on chain. You know, we can pay USDC royalties on chain to and make splits automatically. But different people do it differently. Some people say it's on chain, but it's really a backend that's, you know, processing all the splits and then just kind of forwarding the transactions to the different wallets. If the backend is down, then obviously those splits don't happen. But if you do everything on chain, you have to deal with who's paying for the transactions. I think that's one of the biggest consideration at the end of the day, in the design.
Especially if stakeholders want to have different payouts. So if you have to swap as well, it's not that trivial, essentially, if you want to have like a fully dynamic mechanism. And that's why I think a lot of people use these protocols. There's Slice, if I remember correctly. So there's a lot of flavors to pick from, but I think
And
that's
really
what we're
trying
trying to do. Sorry, go ahead.
To support the different use cases. At the end of the day, it's all about use cases, right? And each, you know, protocol and application is going to work slightly differently. They can all execute a split payment, but based on their use case, you know, they may design it differently.
Yeah, and definitely if we want to add conditional logic and contract chaining, so an agreement being payee of another agreement, or for NFTs to be recipients, like collection holders being recipients. So there's kind of, it's a deep rabbit hole. So I mean, that's why I think there's kind of a few layers to it, and some of them can be like a common, let's say, best practice or even you know, standard solution. But the more intricate you go in the use case, the more you have to add your own kind of bells and whistles on top of it.
Yeah, well, I guess we could do like a whole session just on splits maybe in the future. That would be interesting. I think there's
Absolutely.
like 12 different solutions. Thank you very much to Bruno and to Gilad. We're going to move on to Ivan or Ivan. And just so you know, I put in the chat the agenda so you can see who's speaking when. It looks kind of wonky, but it should be good enough. Okay. So Ivan, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Can you guys see me? Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, so Vibes and Logic, we're building a Web3 DSP, and we really focused on the UI. And the angle that we're actually taking is that in addition to delivering audio, we are doing physical and digital audio visualization at scale. And so what we're doing is using ML and deep learning to do very deep audio analysis and extract the emotion of the music, the structure of a song, and then design a visual experience in a very kind of similar way that Mind Journey works from prompts. It's kind of essentially like a mind journey for music at the end of the day. And so what essentially Vibes and Logic is, we're enriching the music experience by binding this complementary AI-driven experience layer on our proprietary streaming protocol that essentially delivers the audio and the visuals data. And our data is super light and descriptive, which means that it's very easy to ingest and by metaverse, by 3D Unity VR experiences, by smart home IoT lighting fixtures, and 2D display casting experiences. And when you have the streaming protocol with the lighting data, on the same protocol, like we can do actually some really interesting things, such as your smart home can integrate a lot of different light fixtures together and kind of simulate the festival experience. You can do building visualizations, and you can also power IoT devices for wrist pulsators, for example, and kind of body motion suits for deaf people, so more people can experience the music. And so in our use case, and you know, kind of what I think I'm kind of looking to gain here and talk about is to kind of really understand how do we properly onboard artists, how do we verify them. And so when we ingest tracks, we're looking for ways to compensate those artists. And you know, we started dealing with the headache of, let me just find the actual onboarding stuff that we have here. You know, with the headache of how do we, you know, how do you ingest music? How do you ingest a track versus an album? And then if we're the source of distributing the income generated by these music assets, what are the labels, I guess, one way of the different roles of people that need to get compensated. And one of the things in our system that we're thinking about is how do we get more validated artists on? So when we have to, for example, upload a DJ set and there are multiple tracks with multiple producers, how do we essentially link that ecosystem, and so everybody's fractional payments can kind of be disseminated down. So these are just, you know, some of the flows in our process. Like we paid a lot of attention to audience and the kind of things that, you know, they're looking for as we were looking to kind of crack that. And from a data perspective, you know, in our kind of designs and JSON metadata, you know, we have a set object, which, you know, could be used for DJ set or for something like an album. And then on the track, we have this like giant metadata object, right? And this is kind of how I envision.
Ivan, it's a bit hard to read. Can you make the font a bit bigger?
Oh yeah. Let's see. Yes, I can. There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, of course. So we definitely did not go super detailed on the metadata on the track object, because we were expecting to either ingest some of it, but in our use case, this is what it looks like, right? We have the schema, the track ID, with potentially some sort of mapping to a single source of truth, then all the metadata that we ingest, and then we have features and sections, and these are additional kind of visualization metadata elements that we look for. Respond to, like, you know, what we're doing.
So have you seen, I put it here in the chat, I know it's basically called the music NFT metadata proposal, which is based on what the team in the Telegram group created. So maybe as a base case, if we can use something like this as a base case and then maybe build off of it, because one of the things that example has, it has an attributes section and the credits section. So the idea about the attributes section at the bottom, maybe I can actually share that really quickly so we can see, but or you can just share your screen as you're looking at it, but let me just see if I can just do that instead. But if we're looking to add, where is it? Okay. We're looking to add a section to a piece of music. Here, you see this attributes thing here?
Mm-hmm.
This is basically an open section. Now, it has some built-in things, but the idea about anything in JSON is that you can have an unlimited amount of things that you can keep adding to it, even though nobody might care by default. You can keep adding new attributes to it. For example, underlying video track, etc. So if we use something like this as a very basis, and I guess as a basis, it might not need some things that are to do with NFT. I mean, they're added, but if you think about a music track that has just an unlimited amount of attributes, then you can keep adding attributes to it and it will always match. Everyone can read those attributes, and then some people will care about them and some people won't.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, have you looked at something like this? And if
So
not, maybe this could be.
this is the first time I've seen this document. I'm super happy that it exists, and I definitely want to spend some time in it. I did not know there's a Telegram group that exists, and I'd love to get in on that and contribute there as well. But yeah, this is great, and I think a lot of it from an experience layer perspective, you know, I might recommend some things, but obviously, you know, that everybody has to decide if that's valuable for the majority.
Yeah, and Stephanie wrote here in the chat is that if you want to join this group, just put your Telegram username and
Perfect,
you'll find your way in there. And I only joined that group recently myself, and I discovered that it exists. And that's kind of the point, is that we have a right hand and a left hand. We don't really know what everyone's doing. At least this way we can at least share the information. I'm not saying that that example is the perfect example of the metadata, but it's good enough maybe as a base layer to start with, and we can shape it and craft it instead of creating something from zero. Now it might not fit all the use cases. That's the only thing, because it's specifically designed for music NFTs. So in that regard, the concept of the attribute section, I think that's the important part for maybe what you're looking for. Maybe is an idea.
Sounds good.
And I think that goes for almost any project here that might need extra metadata. Hey, Kyle, to, for example, keep adding things into that nobody has integrated yet, but they might integrate tomorrow, is that we can keep it almost as a experimental section where people can keep adding to it. And then at some point when we see a specific amount of use cases for it, we can just make a hard-coded section for it if it's generic enough. For example, ISRC might be generic enough, right? But underlying video layer might not be for all types of music. But really cool, like this use case that you're building. I'm gonna stop now. Maybe other people have questions.
I have a quick question. So like in this case, Ivan, where you're not the DSP, you're just collecting this metadata and sending it off where for the artist? You're sending it directly to the artist?
Oh, I am the DSP in the consumer view, and I'm essentially getting the music asset either directly through artists or through one of those distribution platforms. The visualization data, if the visuals director decides to publish it, that will get published as an NFT or as a limited edition NFT. And the way that I envision the model is that it's almost like a new medium, because you have the lighting and the visuals. And so I see the visuals artists having to get paid as well. And so the splits will now include the visuals creator, right? And these artists oftentimes are the same guys that are putting together the visuals for the big stages that, you know, the productions take place. So I'm hoping that that's just another set of assets that get monetized with the music that's designed for the music, but we don't get to take advantage of those assets at home.
Okay.
So you're a distributor. Does that mean that you also collect payments? Are you planning for people to pay you to use these tracks, and then you're going to forward them to artists?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to be like a metaverse friendly, almost like a DistroKid in a way, but with video or something like that? Or is that minimizing that?
The way that I picture, the way that I see it, it's basically a digital only Insomniac, right? Like I want to provide the music visualization stages, and I want to like enable, like if you're, I don't know, Wax Motif and you want to throw a rave, that I can give you the tools, the music visualization tools that you can just build an experience, and that can be visualizers with a bunch of artists, etc. So you have that library, and then you create the experience, you invite the fans, and you know, hopefully everybody makes a lot of money, because we don't have to, you know, store stages and move stages around the country, and it's all pixels.
Is your platform, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is your platform building the community of the fans around it, or is it just a relationship with the artist?
So the strategy is to build it for the artists, and if I prove to the artists that I have the highest revenue per stream, because our business models include a whole bunch of digital assets that are super high margin, right? Like the assumption is that the fans follow the artists, right? If an artist throws an underground rave, like people are gonna go into expensive Teslas and drive to the shitty parts of town to, party. So I think we've all done that, or some of us have. And yeah, so if it's a $10 experience and the artist can make like a lot of money, and fans who are in wheelchairs that can go to the live events can have that experience, I think that's kind of like the business model. It's for the times that we don't want to go out and crush the live event.
Okay.
So how, it may be a weird question, but why are you, since you're you're basically creating this, platform to distribute to, let's say, festivals and raves, etc. You get paid for it. Why does it have to be on Web3? I mean, you could easily build it on Web2,
It's
right?
transparency. I just don't want to deal with the accounting. Like, and somebody said it earlier, right? I don't want to argue with, who collected. Like when we used to throw raves in the Bay Area, like I was an investor in a few, I never saw my money back, right? Oh, someone stole the money. It's like, I don't want any of that. I want, here's what the fans paid to get in. Here's what the splits were. And at the end of the show, or the minute after the performance is over, everybody gets paid. Thank you very much. Let's do this again. Nice doing business with you. And that's kind of like the vision, right? Like, I don't want anybody calling me, where's my money, right? It's just not the business I want to be in.
Anybody else have any questions? Then I have another one. You are going to get a supply of music, or maybe you already have one, and you get artists to basically join your platform and upload their music. Then they're going to be paired up with it, or automatically it's going to get visualized through an algorithm, through an AI, I guess. And then people can purchase this visualization. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so the idea is that you'll come as an artist, you would upload. Initially, I'm thinking I'm going to go EDM first, DJ sets, right? Because that's very niche, very specialized, and it's with an audience that already really gets the live event, the importance of visuals of the event experience.
The mixes are concerned, they're just stereo wave files. Are you looking to do immersive?
Oh, I split them in, like we use in the back end, we split them into stems. So we know, we got the drum, the vocals, etc. And then we do another layer of analysis on top of the stems. And that's why you need like deep analysis of the music, right? Because just a flattened file, there's not enough information there. So by doing the splits, I'm able to isolate the drums to one set of light fixtures, right? I'm able to isolate the vocals to another set of light fixtures. Yeah, and that's, well, hang on, like I'll show you. I have 2 more minutes. I can use the time to show you this. I recorded this just the other night. Right, so kind of like the idea is that if you're listening to Above and Beyond show, for example, right, like I want to, like, we want to be able to link the lighting of the live event or to the music to the room, right? And it's so much more immersive when those 2 things happen versus not, right? So this is like all LED lights here, and it's truly immersive, right? And so for this to work, you need to understand the structure of the music and what you're listening to. And if there's visualization data, the vibe data, then we use it. If there's like an official artist light pack, and if there isn't, we'll create AI. So if the person who actually does the visuals at the live event does it, but I think that will come over time, because when all those visual designers find out, hey, all those assets that I'm sitting on, I can actually like recreate that experience for their home. I think it's, I think it'll like really, once it clicks for people, I think it will be like really, really cool to do this at scale, right?
That's beautiful. That's such a cool idea. I have 2 questions. First,
Yeah.
regarding operations, is your plan to just use existing music NFTs and then just basically on top of them add this new type of NFT that you mint, or are you just going to reuse that and just add extra metadata? or will people have to remint a new music NFT with those extra pieces of information? Like, what's your currently like?
Currently, and again, everything changes as you guys know so fast here. But I'm thinking like I want to mint the if the music is not already existing as part of an NFT, as a minted NFT, I will just create the vibes data for a marketplace, so these visual artists can get credit for their work and hopefully monetize it. If it's like a brand new artist, like I'm still kind of struggling with how do I onboard independence and deal with the cheating thing, and my inclination is I don't want to. I'm just going to partner with a DistroKit or a distributor. I forget the name of the company earlier, but I grabbed the email. Revelator, right? So partner with Revelator. Sorry, guys, and yeah, just hand it off to them, and as long as music keeps pouring in, then and I don't have to worry about marketing the experience. Then as an entrepreneur, that's kind of where I want to play, because that's my strength. Experience creation.
What about taking all the music that already exists on, let's say, Sound XYZ, and then adding that extra layer to it? Is that one of the things that you're planning to do?
I'm gonna go out and scrape as much music as I can, right? I like that's the game plan, because if music until my library is full, right, there's no subscription model for me, and maybe subscription model doesn't make sense, although subscription is something that fans are used to paying for. And I think that there are different business models that can put a lot more money in artists' pockets. For example, a lot of people who listen to Spotify, I read it's like 840 minutes a month of streaming music of what the average listener is, right? So if you do some reverse math in terms of what it actually costs to deliver to someone and what we pay as fans or as subscribers, right? And again, not everybody is 840, right? The average is 840, but there's like a margin there that Spotify uses instead of to pay artists, to pay the Joe Rogans, right? To fund the next kind of growth of the company. And I'm kind of thinking, well, there's other ways to get growth. The other way is instead of like, we used to have a saying, it's more valuable to be a favorite than famous. Because for fame, you have to buy fame, you have to spend money on advertising. But if you're a favorite, if you provide value, like if I take care of the artist or my consumer, right, the growth is gonna come, right? And so if I think about my advantage as an entrepreneur, not having like signed the deals that I've signed as a Spotify and the record labels, and I'm starting from a clean slate, let's fucking start over and do it right. Which is why I'm like really interested in what this organization is about.
Okay, one last thing. Do you have an ask from the builder community, or do you want to share some of the files or the structures that you already have in place so people can learn more about it?
From the build community, I mean, what you sent me, that link with the metadata is really kind of what I kind of need to know where things are headed. So my systems are ready to ingest NFTs with that metadata and compensate everybody that needs to get compensated correctly. So
well,
I guess like what's that?
Most NFTs do not have that metadata. That the plan is to hopefully I mean, some of them do, but some of them don't. I think Catalog does, but hopefully
Catalog and everything that was on Mint Songs as well, because that metadata schema was developed by the folks at Mint Songs, RIP. I know it's no longer a thing, but there's a lot of music unminted on there. So if you use that schema, you will find a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's going decentralized, right? So like, that's kind of what I'm betting on, is that I don't have to beg people for music. I can partner and ingest it. And
that's cool. So it looks like you already got your wish. And
I can help you connect to other communities too as well, if you want, because I am connected to a few other developing communities.
Yeah, Stephanie, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
And since Stephanie mentioned, I highly recommend that everybody here get to know Stephanie, and she's a great host and connector and facilitator of great discussion. So thanks for offering to help. We are going to move on Ivan, thank you very much. And I think our next presenter is Maurice, right? Or Morris, I'm not sure.
Yes, I am. Thank you everybody for joining. All these projects on this panel are pretty phenomenal. So thank y'all for sharing. We are a younger company. Our team has been together less than a year. We've been through 2 business accelerators, and let me go ahead and get some stuff shared real quick, so y'all don't have to look at me so much. And so the name of our company is Punchline Audio Authentication. So when I hear a few people talk about they don't want to deal with authentication and that type of stuff, or, you know, I get excited because that's exactly what we're working on, right? Our main goal is to, I guess by definition, is to automate the audio creation and distribution process, improving the integrity and transparency for audio works while creating endless business opportunities. And some things I want to just note before we continue is we are not exclusive to the music industry, right? We are audio agnostic. What we want to do, and my intention of being in this community, is making sure that the metadata standard that we're creating can cover, you know, 90+% of the music industry's use cases, right? So we may not be perfect across the field, but if we can at least have the right partnerships to cover most of the use cases, then, you know, that's satisfactory to us. So yeah, we're not trying to replace the music industry or anything like that. And yeah, let's just go ahead and continue from here. All right, so let's just jump into an example of the problem. So these 3 areas in terms of the creation and distribution process are the main areas we're looking at. But more specifically, a lot of protocols are starting right here with this audio asset, and they're moving that audio asset to a streaming services, both Web 2 and Web 3. It's just good to note that we are, as of right now, and probably for like the next year, we're going to be heavily focused on the recording software and the creation of this. And so just an example of some of the problems we're experiencing today are the fact that this recording software, most of that data in there, such as the products, the manufacturers, the parameters, are all isolated inside of the recording software. Now, I'll explain later how by extracting that data, it can become business assets, pretty much. It can be metadata that can be used for business revenue. And then with this audio file, as of today, the metadata isn't permanent. So it's pretty much, it lacks integrity, the lifetime integrity. And then when we're looking at the distributors, of course, we all know the problems with the current industry in terms of how they pay out artists, the time in which how long it takes for artists to get paid out. And so I just want you to remember this model because we'll come back to it. And so going into what we're doing, right? We're creating a native app that uses an API and SDK to communicate with the recording software. And so recording software, we'll have a SDK for recording software to communicate with this native app that holds information about the creator. And what that allows is the creator to transmit ID information, here we call it Punch ID, into the recording software, which means credentials are baked into the software. And so Punch ID is a digital identity, single sign-on identity verification, similar to Creative Passport, I believe, Roy, you shared with me earlier. And it's for audio profiles, to manage your audio profiles. And when we say audio profiles, we're referring to the product registrations, the audio marketplaces, the PROs, collection agencies, Web3 wallets, all that, right? Anything you're using to create, distribute, or collect during the audio, the creation distribution process, any of those services. And as far as the identity verification, it's a Web 2 solution where if you're looking at, you know, the problems we have with streaming services now, where companies like Spotify, Apple Music have billion-dollar escrows for unpaid artists due to the lack of metadata, right? We want to use this ID system to verify who the person is and being able to request information from other services to complete the information needed to, get that transaction. And then the next piece of, I guess the next layer of our technology is what we call a Punchline, not to confuse it with the company, but this is the actual asset that's created. And this is an automated NFT standard designed for public and private metadata access. And so this is our, what we call asset layer. Going to the previous slide, this is what we're talking about right here. So what's exported from the recording software is your punchline. And what's considered a punchline is the audio file reference, which includes the exported WAV file location, the session data, and these metadata points haven't been defined completely. I'm giving y'all ideas. I'm joining this conversation so that I can get better ideas on like what that metadata standard is. We have an infrastructure that allows the information to flow, but we don't have the specifics on what that metadata is. And so, yeah, the session data is information that's coming directly from the recording software, the creators, the products, and those splits. And then we have performance metrics, right? So that's more of a container that's being held, and we'll monitor performance metrics, but we're not interacting with the payment process, right? So we'll monitor how the performance of a piece of audio, and we have our own token that rewards, but we'll get into that later. And then I mentioned this earlier, metadata is autonomously fed into the punchline from the DAW. So what we're talking about here is, it's really a behavior thing when it comes to creatives. We all know that metadata is needed to get paid for your music, but at the end of the day, it's a left brain, right brain thing where most creators just don't want to enter they don't want to go through the process of entering all the necessary metadata, or they're so excited about metadata or uploading their audio that they just skip that step. And that's why Apple, Spotify, Tidal have billion-dollar accounts with unpaid royalties. And I believe Stephanie has a question. Yes.
Yeah, my question is just, how are the splits being calculated? Is it based on contribution? Are you like, is the software able to calculate that, or is it just
We'll have
predetermined?
We'll have a few different options. Ultimately, it'll probably be a default. We don't know yet. To be honest, we're going to get the what that default is. We have different options like equal split by default, but then we'll have sliders that allow people to customize those splits, right? Ultimately, we don't want to make that decision for them, but going to your idea about the contributions, that's something we thought about as well. Like if maybe there's a weight of how many tracks your Punch ID is associated with, and that could determine, your percentage. We would have to get more feedback from creators to see if that's what they want, because then we have to start thinking about things like drummers, right? If you're a drummer, you're going to have 7, 8 tracks of audio, and that means your ID is stamped to 7 or 8 tracks just for, hi-hats, toms, the different parts of the drum. And, that could throw the calculation off a little bit, but it is something we're considering. And then, so yeah, we have any other questions before we even move on?
Keep going. I have a few. Keep going though.
Okay, all right. So yeah, we have a native token, and that's for accessing this private metadata that we spoke about earlier. All right, so it'll all make sense here in a minute. All right. So now we're going to talk about how it works, right? This flow of data is very similar to the one we showed, a few slides ago. The only difference is we're talking about how the native app is interacting with this process. So I already mentioned that this native app holds a specific set of metadata about you, and that can get transmitted into the recording software directly into the track that you're recording on. And the other metadata like the VSTs, the plugins, all that stuff is scraped and arranged on export. So when you're getting ready to export your audio file, that metadata is collected and arranged in a way where we want to make sure that it can maximize the potential revenue for the audio owner, essentially. So that metadata exports the stems, and you control the stems as well. So if you just want one final version, then that's the stem that exports. If you want a breakdown of drums, instruments, however you want to do it, you export. And this is the asset layer that we were talking about, right? So this is the punchline, and the punchline contains this session data. Once again, this metadata isn't final, but it includes things like session ID, splits, products, hardware and software products. But I will tell you, the first phase of this will be focused on the software side. We'll bring the hardware side later. Punch IDs, that's our ID system, so all your credits. And that's being pushed into this punchline, right? So now we have a secured, and this audio is being stored on a decentralized network. And the only thing that's being saved to the blockchain is the reference of that location. All right, so now that we have, this is our phase one right here. This is our main goal right here. Because as you can see, even like with some of the people that are presenting today, at this point, you have a secure file with metadata that comes directly from the source. And from there, it's ready to be shared with DSPs, streaming services, or, these Web3 projects are unique. So anything in between. And when that's shared, the metric and consumer data is monitored and saved in the same location with the punchline. So it's a dynamic NFT, and that's changing. And every 24 hours, it stamps a metadata to that particular punchline. And then lastly, the performance metrics and the metadata that would be included would be your streams, downloads, your IDs, because what we'll essentially do is partner with a streaming service, and we have an account service SDK that pretty much creates a punch ID for all the accounts, all the existing accounts. And that can be done in the background without interference of the consumers don't even have to know it's there. And what would happen essentially is the value trade that we're trying to create is we have private metadata on both the creator side, which includes the products, and on this performance metrics, which is going to be your consumers and your consumers. And what we want to do is allow these two sides to exchange data, but they have to go through the audio owners. The audio owner serves as a broker and essentially profits off of this metadata trade or this metadata purchase. Now, why would a recording software want to know this performance metrics? Well, they want to know how their products are performing on the market. That's marketable information. That's marketing data points. And more importantly, with data being the new cash, right? It's just more information for these product companies to know about how their products are being used, who's using them, who's listening to it. And the same thing for the metric side, right? If they're seeing spikes in certain songs, or you're seeing certain trends, it might make sense for the streaming service to purchase more data other than like what it sounds like, who's on it, but like what other products are being used. They could find trends like, 80% of this particular playlist is using Ableton, which is a recording. Well, sometimes I forget I'm talking to music people, so I'm used to like explaining what native instruments and Ableton and all this stuff is. But so that value of exchange is what we're trying to create. However, the only thing we want to really control is this native application. Everything else is an integration. And the asset is really what we want to be responsible for in terms of, creating the asset, making it, connectable to Web 2 or Web 3 services. And so really, I want to talk more about the products and the manufacturing side of this metadata, mainly because it's something that's not talked about a lot. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there where, with our token, being able to, if products know that you're exporting audio that includes their products, there can be reward systems built into that. And that's what we would like to do with our token is we want to allocate tokens to a Pro Tools or, you know, a native instruments so that every time you export a song, there's campaigns that can be ran that essentially airdrops the tokens to you. And the tokens can be used for either purchasing more metadata or the exports. But I would say that when it comes to products, there's a lot of data because you're getting like, you get 15, 20 products in one audio export. And so I would say that that's 15 to 20 possible streams of not necessarily, I mean, depending on how the payout is, that's not really up to us. We more or less work with the company to allocate tokens and they set up custom campaigns for their users. But ideally you're getting from one export, it goes from, okay, the only thing we can do with this is distribute it and collect from the distributors to, all right, now there's at least some sort of channel of income coming from this side of the game, the recording side. And more importantly, the B2B side, you're profiting off of every time there's a purchase. All right, so that was a mouthful. I have one more slide that gives direct examples of what that would look like. So if y'all want to ask questions, or I can move on.
Let's see the examples.
All
Yeah,
right.
keep going.
So now what we call the playlist market is the opportunity to purchase some of this private metadata. And so an example of that would be Spotify, who is assigned a Punch ID, is purchasing all the session data from any song that hits 5,000 streams in one day, depositing play money into that audio owner's Punch ID wallet. All right, so in that case, it's an event that's triggered by a certain amount of streams. It's a token distribution event that's triggered by a certain amount of streams on Spotify. In another instance, a producer pays another producer to reveal what virtual instrument they used in a song that he discovered on Apple Music. So the audio owner, the producer, and Apple Music would split that purchase because Apple Music would serve as a sort of, it'd be like a finder's fee. It'd be a small percentage that Apple controls. And lastly, Pro Tools deposits play money into their customer's wallet every time they create a punchline. So that was the example I gave in the previous slide where the software that you're using is rewarding you for using their software. And with that being said, you know, I'll wrap it up right there and we can, and so before I stop, I would say, I'm interested in this community because what we provide is, you know, sort of an architecture of how data can flow through the system, but we don't have the particular metadata standard. So the document that you shared, Roy, is very helpful. I'll take a look at that. And just being considerate of some of the other protocols that are being built, we want to make sure that, you know, 90% of our integrations are possible with Web3 projects. And so, yeah, I'm super impressed with everything everybody's doing. And yeah, any questions, I'd be happy to ask.
I guess this is going to be way longer. I think we'd have to talk separately. I'm audio guy, so this is like in the process of just, I know you said this is not just for music, but your example here is DAWs and music software. In the production process, there's hundreds of plugins, hundreds of tracks, hundreds of mixes being made for one song. And a lot of decisions that are being made, a lot of people that you may have a session drummer come in, but those drums get replaced by samples because that session got turned over to a mix engineer. That mix engineer's sessions may have gotten turned back and got handed to a different mix engineer. And then may have also replaced everything, replaced all kinds of stuff. Things from the starting process to the ending process are never the same. And then once it gets down to the mastering, it's changed computers, hard drives, hands, gear from analog to digital, like hundreds and hundreds of times. So are you saying that this is going like everybody needs to be involved and has this tracking, and then is your system designed to track everything?
It's not, I mean, it's a participation type of thing. So yeah, what you're saying is, so if you're in, so we would have, our goal is we have to partner with the DAWs, right? And that's why we're offering, not now, but by next year, we'll be able to offer a free SDKs, right? And that's part of our just, call strategy is we're going to be looking for DAWs that want to participate, creators that want to participate, and DSPs that want to participate, whether that's Web 2 or Web 3. But yeah, so pretty much once they've decided to opt in and for us to use that, or they wanted their software to be used in this, at that point, it's trackable, right? So there's certain parts of it that's not going to be possible if there's no, if they're not participating. For example, the token distribution, right? If they're not participating, if they don't have the wallet set up and all that stuff, obviously they're not in. They're not going to be able to participate. We can still scrape that data, but we're not going to be able to necessarily create a payment channel and all that stuff. So that'll be one thing that we'll run into in terms of how often audio files change, they get manipulated, chopped. That's why our primary market is producers and engineers, like off the get-go, because we want to be able to facilitate how much. I'm a producer, like 3 of our owners are producers as well. So we're very familiar with this. And so the way that would work is we have a custom import export aspect to our SDK. And what that allows is every time you export it, you're not exporting it to the local drive, right? We're hiding the actual audio file. The only people that are allowed to access that audio file are people that you as the owner give access to it. And the only way that they can import it is through a participating DAW. So it's literally, it's kind of trapped inside of participating services.
Yeah, I get it.
And
I get it. Okay.
the more, the merrier. Like with,
yeah, like in and itself is a marketing, like you're making the music in an environment specifically for this
pushing it out.
Yeah, I got it.
Right,
okay.
right, yeah. And we just want to make sure that, by time we export these stems, we want to make sure that metadata is compatible with as many as possible. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts, isolated parts at the moment. So that's why I'm having the conversation with you smart people so that we can actually figure it out.
Yeah, like someone couldn't come out of their DAW and go into an analog console and come back in because it would lose the metadata. They would need to go, they would have to stay digital, basically.
Essentially, well, I would say at proof of concept, yes, but we do have some hardware solutions. But as I mentioned earlier, for right now, it is mostly. So could you explain that example in terms of you're taking the audio, are you just running it through
I'm a mastering engineer. I'm both producer and a mastering engineer. So like at mastering, I'm coming D to A. So I'm converting digital to analog to run through an analog chain to master. Okay. And then it's
Cliff, Cliff, I apologize. Cliff, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that I think a couple of other people have questions. I just want to make sure it doesn't just go off rails.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'll shoot my email in the chat real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just
wanted to ask. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just want to say, Maurice, I do a lot of work with Adobe, and I don't know if you looked at their business model, but they connected Behance, their community, with NFTs as a way to authenticate original source. So that might be a mental model for you to just check out and see what's relevant for you.
Right. I haven't looked too deep into that, but I did notice. I was looking at somebody's computer screen and I noticed that there was they imported an image and the credits.
Yeah, I think it's associated to the Adobe ID that's licensed on the software. So they start the chain with, yes, that person actually sat in a Photoshop license with that user to create the pixels. Okay. So I think it's just an interesting parallel to what maybe you're trying to do as well.
Definitely, I appreciate it. I'll have to dig more into that because it is a similar model. All right, I'll go ahead if y'all have any.
I just want to see, anybody else have any more questions? Because if not, I have a couple. Okay, my two questions. First of all, is I know that you said you were looking for standards, etc. Do you have anything specific that you want to ask the builder community, or do you have any kind of set of files that you already have that you want to share that people can look into? Because I really love the idea, because you're basically creating a new type of market, where as a producer, I can share my favorite plugins, and I can share my techniques, maybe what parameters I use for the plugins, and all that kind of stuff. I think that could be very, very valuable for a lot of different people, also for the marketing people at different DAWs and different places. But you have here a couple of things. You have private information and you have public information. And private information on chain is very currently, it's not really yet a solved problem. I mean, you have tools like Unlock Protocol maybe, or Lit Protocol, but overall it's not a solved problem yet. And then you have a lot of generic data that's mentioned here, like session ID, for example, or the splits, or how you intend to do the punch IDs, etc. So I guess I'm asking, do you have examples of structures that you already have in place as an example or of a proof of concept?
I have an
Or-
example that is very brief though, but I think it'll be something that you're looking for. And so, yeah, here we're looking at pretty much the session data. If we were to go back, yeah, so we're looking at this section right here. And what we're seeing is a session ID, in our opinion, right? And this can be connotated into one line, but we want to include what DAW is being created in, the creation date, creation time, export date, export time, which I left out, and the owner, right? So I'm referring to a punch ID here, but as we continue this conversation, that could change. And so that would cover most of your session data. So once that just means you started a new session. The first time you hit save in your DAW, that's what's going to be created. And then so moving on to the products, this is where you'll have 20, 30 different, iterations of this. Would be your manufacturer, the actual product. There may be a model, in between that, but a version and a serial number. And I'm debating this part in terms of a link. So depending on who owns that product, based off how they purchased it, it could be an affiliate opportunity where they get tokens for sending people that way. But I don't know, we're having that conversation still. Contributors, once again, we're just pretty much referencing the punch IDs, and then the splits as well. I forgot to get to actually filling this out, but yeah, it would just pretty much from the DAW being able to use that slider to, create the splits. And then at that point you hit export and, the file is exported. But this is particularly information for the creative side of things, right? And we do plan on expanding that. The list that you shared with us is going to be super helpful. My main purpose of today was really to cover this product aspect. It's just give people, something else to look at, because it tends to be overlooked. And, that's a $40 to $60 billion industry. And, why not create some sort of market with that? And
I can imagine that as like a sub attribute in the NFT metadata that we had before. We'll have a sub attribute called, I don't know, punch info or something like that, or like punchline attribute. And then this whole thing can fit in there as an added
smart
thing. So that way people can plug into it if it exists. And I think that's useful.
I like that idea. That's something I'm gonna have to explore. But yes, so I will quit sharing this. And
the final questions?
Yeah, sorry, just a quick question. So could the punch ID also include like IPI validation, just including that information for the songwriter or participant?
I apologize. Can you explain what that is?
IPI, that's the ID that a performance rights society or a rights society gives each songwriter
Yes, yes. So yeah, we just really want to be any product or service that a person is using across their creation or distribution chain. We want to be able to, use a Punch ID or to save that information in the Punch ID. And so this is sort of an example of what that looks like. We have, an artist, a creator, and all of the services that they use. So here we're using BMI. I think that kind of fits into what you were talking about, but also being able to use other blockchains, wallet addresses. These are just references to information about this artist, not necessarily the wallet itself.
Understood. That helps a lot.
Oh, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Good question. And yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for us.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Maurice. And really, really interesting. I love all these different kind of variations of ideas. Okay, last but definitely not least, we have Mersad. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Amazing conversation. And I'm really happy that we can contribute forward to the topic. So there are two topics which trigger us building Soundverse initially. Number one was we mentioned the NFT standards of ERC 721, that every music NFT is unique. It doesn't make sense for us because music, it's one file, and just because the token ID is 721, it doesn't make it unique. And because of that, we were looking into the architecture that we can build to give uniqueness to the NFT and also allow the music NFT to be scaled and be distributed to the fans. So
Mersad, can I ask you quickly, can you explain a little bit about Soundverse, what you do?
Sure. In Soundverse, we are an NFT platform focused on bringing utility to the music NFTs. We have a marketplace as a base of the product, and we have a Soundverse rooms, which whoever owns these music NFTs, they can showcase their music into this community space. And that's the big picture, overly speaking, to give you. And we were being recognized by Spotify. I've mentioned it in a Telegram group previously. We had a talk about our concept with them, got pretty insightful feedback, which I'm going to share later on the question side. But one of the, since the topic is about the license and masters, I wanted to focus on our minting architecture, which I'm just sharing my screen with you guys to give you a little bit of visuals that you can have a better understanding of how things are being structured here. So we are trying to align creators, middlemen, and the fans. As you know, in the industry, in the Web3 industry, many artists are talking about to removing the middleman. We think middleman is there to stay because they add value, but they're going to become a strategic investor rather than a person or a company to manage the payment. That's why they're going to be a shift in their role from being a middleman to a strategic investor. And fans are going to be curators for artists, and artists are the creators. So based on this analogy, we create our minting architecture. So on every song an artist mint through our platform, they're going to get two types of NFTs. Number one is called Master NFT. Master NFT is one out of one. It's a ERC 721 standard, and the Master NFT receives a percentage of on-chain royalty from the secondary sales of the licenses. On the other side, licensed NFTs are ERC 1155 token standard, which is designed for fans to be affordable, that they can utilize it in different metaverse spaces, or let's say as a license to use. And when the artist mint these NFTs, the artist also can say, I create my music for with other songwriter and my manager. I want to give 5% of the royalties to my manager, 5% to songwriter, and I want to keep 40% of the royalties, and 50% going to be going toward the master owner. Initially, by default, the master owner going to be the artist, but artists can decide to sell the master to a fan or to a community to eventually raise capital and bootstrap his career. So once the artists want to mint the song, they have an option to select how much percentage they're going to receive on the secondary sales of the licenses, let's say 10%, and then they're going to decide how much percentage the master owner going to receive from this 10%. So once they select that, and they can mint both, and the percentages and the royalties are going to be minted through the smart contract of the master. So to give you an example, let's say if the total secondary volume of the license is $1,000 and there is 10% royalty, that means the artist is going to receive $100 from the whole volume. But whoever owns the master going to receive the 30% or 40% of that $100. And that's the architecture we built. So by that, we are trying to, our masters are targeting DAOs, because we have been seeing a lot of DAOs are coming as a new record labels per se, because they're having a Web3 community and they're trying to bootstrap artists. We are trying to target our masters for super fans and also record labels. And we have been talking with some indie record labels initially, which the concept was appealing to them. On the other side, the licensors are fans, artists, curators who want to really use that song. The use case can be in a different places. The music has its utility, which I'm not going to go through detail there, but the purpose is to integrate the metadata through the licenses in a way that they're globally recognized as an official license to use. Then to a Soundverse, whoever owns this music NFTs, they can open a Soundverse room, they can showcase it there, and they can build a micro community around their music collection and have a conversation. So this is the big picture. I'm welcoming any Q&A and happy to answer your questions here.
Very, very powerful. Since you have this, you're very much pushing for the license and the representation of the song, the composition almost. I wouldn't say, maybe master is a very overloaded word because it might just mean the recording. But I'm pasting here in the chat a link to an article and an EIP that I'm working on, which is EIP 5553. Maybe you already heard about it, which is specifically for that type of use case, where you have the concept of the song, and then you have the collectibles of the song. And it already supports the idea of multiple types of royalties, etc., as a standard or potential standard. So I would very much like to see if that type of EIP might fit what you're building, because I'm planning to build on that as well. And that way, if you're building on that and I'm building on that, then we can basically integrate very, very easily together. So I don't know if you've looked into that.
I was reading about it in the Telegram chat briefly, but happy to connect off the talk and let's discover what we can do together.
Yeah, exactly. Because 5553 is specifically for intellectual property on chain. It doesn't just have to be music, could also be images, etc. Sebastian also knows about this, etc. So I think it could be very, very interesting. This concept of separating the licensing from the underlying work is, I think that's the key to scalability. So I'm really, really happy to see that you guys are working towards that. And there could be many types of licenses, of course.
Exactly.
Cool. Other questions?
I just want to know more, definitely. This is probably, it excites me. This project is very, very exciting to me. So please keep me in mind and include me in the conversations.
Sure. Just if you want to check it out, we just launched 2 days ago. You can check our platform and try it yourself. And then we listed our licenses extremely cheap and affordable for people to start, collecting and utilize it. Any detailed question, would love to have a chat. So just to share what we think the music NFT use case is going to be. As we're talking in the group, licensing the NFT going to bring a lot of utility into different environments in the metaverse in the future. And just to give you one use case that I, as a kid, was having a lot of fun using the music into the game. was when I was playing GTA. I'm sure very many of you are familiar with the GTA. You could, in GTA Vice City, you could download MP3 files and you could upload them into a file called MP3 on your computer. And you could change the radio of the car which you were driving in the game, and you could listen to your own music. And the experience was super fun, but all these platforms, they were forced to remove that feature because of the licensing issue, because of the global licensing issue. And I think NFTs can be a way forward in this direction to allow games to let the users to import their music legally to the platforms and start utilizing it. So that's why I'm very interested to continue the conversation in this community to find a common ground with all you guys that we can use NFTs as a global license permission.
Yeah, I second that use case very much, even in the context of the metaverse. You know, if people buy these digital lands and plots or meta villages, etc., in an ideal world, you'll be able to invite your friends, and the same way that you set the music and lighting in your home for the party, you know, you can essentially include the playlist in the same way that you can at home on new songs or whatever. Yeah, I think that's very important problem to solve, which I don't want to solve.
Have you guys run into problems with the way things are being onboarded and paid out at all? Or does it seem pretty smooth?
I couldn't hear the early words of you.
Has the process been pretty smooth, or what's been the main problems you've ran into with this model?
Well, we onboarded a couple of artists and we are focusing on unpublished music early on. So we're not trying to go mainstream. And the more we go forward, the more we're gonna start initiating talk with the bigger record labels. As of now, we just talked to a couple of record labels in Germany, in LA, in Dubai, that they were interested. They're coming from underground scene and they were pretty open to it. But one of the reasons is they have nothing against it. They're not tied to big, major players. But probably when we get in talk with the Sony and with the BMI and with all these big players, this is going to be pretty questionable and challenging. But we are trying to solve the big picture. We don't try to go solving who owns exactly every single part of the song, because that's very, very difficult task to pull off. And it's very detailed and there's a lot of metadata which is missing. We are trying to solve the big picture, per se, helicopter view, that everything is in order, and then to onboard music on the blockchain and into the metaverse. That's what we're trying to do.
I love that. I just love the separation or the use of licensing to make it more accessible or usable for the average fan. I'm curious what you define as affordable as opposed to what music NFTs cost now.
So at the current stage, the artists, actually we have some known artists with a growing fan base, which they minted their NFTs at 0.001, which is around $1, $2. It's not much, but they were willing to just get on board and try it. So that's for licenses. For the masters, they leased it for 1 Ethereum. And that's the pricing that they got at the moment. We are thinking to a standardized pricing, but we haven't confirmed that idea yet. But that just was our idea that I thought I can share with you here.
And I have a question. These.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm, because I got a little rugged at a point. This is just personal use licenses that we're talking about, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I am. So if you own the NFT, initially you can use it within our Soundverse room. Think about the Soundverse as a Twitter space where you can showcase your music NFTs. That as simple as that. But overall, we want to allow this license to be used across different platforms for personal use.
Yeah, that's actually my question too, is as far as the licensing. So the NFT license doesn't necessarily live in their wallets, it lives on your platform, as far as how and them interacting with it.
So what's that question again?
The use of the licensing, does the NFT or the licensed NFT, does it live in folks' wallet, or does it live and is displayed on your on Soundverse?
It's owned by the people who buy it, so it's going to be in their wallets, but we're going to display them. And once they're being played, we play the music from our backend to create a good audio experience.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask what was the reason for this question? What triggered that question to come? I'm just curious to know.
I'm just curious about the overall culture of music and how people are interacting with it in Web3, and the necessity for wallets just to engage, you know. So I was just curious, at what point do people need a wallet? But it is about ownership of the licensing. So that's why, because I saw, you know, that there was a visual representation on Soundverse. I was just curious if people can engage without having a wallet, just for onboarding purposes and mass adoption, and then, you know.
You can interact with Soundverse without a wallet, so you can just jump into a room and start listening to the music without owning any wallet. So that's purposefully designed that way. But if you don't own a wallet, or if you don't connect your wallet to our platform, you cannot buy them. So and you cannot chat within our rooms, but you can hop in and listen to the music, and you can enjoy the music experience there without owning any wallet.
All right, wonderful. That's appreciated. Thank you.
Welcome.
I wanted to jump in and ask a question that you mentioned something. You stream the music from the back end for a better experience, right? And I don't think that's something we've talked about, which is the permission to store the waveform and restream it on the platform. Is that, or even process it, right? If you want to run some sort of, you know, analysis on it. Has anybody here, you know, especially from metadata perspective, is that a concern?
From just to add my 2 cents from our previous, me and my CTO had a previous experience in the music industry, and that's definitely a concern, specifically in the EU, Europe. This is going to be a concern. In LA, I think going to be a concern from my understanding, also like California, from what it's a thought that I'm willing to have an open discussion on it. I think we have to willing to adopt new business models and new use cases in the Web3. Otherwise, we cannot just move forward. The rules are very complex, very hard. That if you want to not adopt the new rules, new use cases, Web3 can never go forward because of all the restrictions that we know it's in music industry. So that's my 2 cents. But it's definitely a concern. So how we're going to fight, how this is going to be newly adopted by big players, it's a big question.
I guess that's one of the reasons we're all talking here, because at some point, big players will jump in and will try to push towards something that benefits the traditional industry. And if we don't have a good answer, or at least a set of standards we all already kind of agree on in one way or another, it's going to be very difficult to give an alternative to whoever is looking at the standards proposed by big players. So there aren't good answers. As far as I'm concerned, the answer is, as an artist onboards music, they give consent to the platform which onboards it, to do with it specific actions, and basically, you know, ridding them of legal obligations to apply other types of royalties to it, for example, like streaming, etc., but to treat it as a different type. So if technically it's your prerogative to let go of a specific payment for other purposes, but it will be kind of like a very niche case at the beginning. But if there is a standard of relinquishing streaming or storage problems on the onboarding platform, that could be an example even of almost like a semi-legal standard that we can try to adopt. And I don't have good access to lawyers at this point, but I'm sure some of us here could start that conversation. We can even talk about it in the next session.
Just add my 2 cents on what you mentioned. So in Germany and Austria, for example, if you are a music platform streaming music, even though the artists allow you to stream it, you're obligated to pay fees. So no question. Same in California, from what I heard from different lawyers. And this only leaves us to take the risk and be the first to show what can be possible and new business models that going to benefit also these middlemen or record labels along the way. And if we cannot do that, I think it's going to be very difficult. We're going to face what LimeWire faced back in 2003-4. Correct me if I'm wrong on that day. And they got just sued by all these big players. But this is a big challenge here to think how we can adjust it and how we can address it.
The big picture for you guys, is it to be a streaming service, or is it just still more the helicopter view back end?
For us, it's basically a place to showcase and build communities around owning the music. That's what we're trying to do. Think
Like
about
it,
Yeah, think about it like a metaverse, but simplified, because we think people are not ready to jump into the metaverse yet. So very simplified version that we can show people what ownership on the internet mean, how you can experience things, what does it mean to own a music NFT, and so on and so forth. That's the level we are thinking to go at the moment, but the road is very, unclear and dusty. So we just have to keep doing and pushing it forward to see what's going to work the best.
Well,
You have two hands raised, so Sebastian and then Gilad.
Yeah, so I'm very interested about the context of content or the meaning of owning the music. So whereas I would assume in a legal sense that you would only own the license, and so my basic question, it might be a stupid one: why do you need NFTs when you are selling licenses? So that is a thing that also touches the topic of sync licenses, where it might be of use to publicly display that you own the license to actually apply the music to some video or whatever, so that it won't be taken down or any stuff like a receipt for that licensing transaction. But I don't think that it should be called ownership in that sense, because it might confuse people. So if you ask music Web3 people what do you actually sell and what is meant by ownership, then it's certainly not IP ownership. Yeah, it's certainly a very specific defined use of the asset, which is almost never properly described and expressed in the metadata. So that's what we are dealing with. So and I had the conversation with Roy, and he almost convinced me that it's so cheap and effective to issue NFTs as a kind of a receipt for the transaction purchase of that, let's say, a sync license. But I would be interested in your opinion on that.
Sure. So going back to your first question, why NFTs? I think this is a very good question, and my answer might not be complete, but that's what I think about it at this stage. The reason being is, the more we go forward into a digital world, the more we're gonna need the feeling to transport our assets with each other from one platform to another. And at the current stage, platforms are responsible to verify the rights of the music usage. And this is very expensive for the platforms, and this is very expensive for the artists also. Why? If you look at the Rollerbox, they got sued for 200 million. 200 million for illegally, or for trying to encourage people to upload music into their platform. So that cannot be the case, because the more in the next 5-10 years, people want to use music to create these experiences, and this has to be an open environment that platforms can allow end users integrate their music into the whole space. That's one very big use case that I see. I can go one more, but if the time it's it's
No, well, we have if the conversation is interesting, whoever needs to go will finish at 5 minutes. Everyone can stay.
Thank you, Roy. I tell you the second thing. So one of our team members, he owned a streaming channel called We Stream LA. So when he live stream music for the artist, so he get locations with a nice view, and then he bring artists to play 1 hour set. And then when he posts that on the YouTube, YouTube gonna flag him that, yeah, these musics are copyrighted, or you're not allowed to use them, or you're not allowed to monetize them, right? So what does the process look like for him? Let's unpack this. The moment he get these flags, he sees, okay, these people own the music XYZ, and these are the owners or record labels who are the right owners, right? So then he has to go manually contact these platforms or these companies and ask permission that, hey, I have this, I shoot a cool video, I'm promoting your music, I spend a lot of money on that. Minimum, he has to spend $6,000 per event if he only have one DJ to play this. And then he has to go through all this, get the permission manually. This is a lot of headache for them. So the way I can envision this gonna be in the future is that if YouTube can coordinate and collaborate with music NFT platforms, and people can buy right on spot the license to utilize for commercial use or for YouTube use, that they can start monetizing this music which they put into the video. That's a second use case for the music NFTs that I can see it's gonna coming. It's not there yet, but I just can I can see it. I can be wrong, but these are the two use cases that I can share with you at this moment.
So I have another question, real quick question. Do you see more as a performance license or a mechanical license?
Excuse me, performance license or?
Mechanical license.
So initially performance license, but over time we have to think about ways to integrate mechanical license as well. So what I know is that the old models are not effective. They're not effective for today's world, and we have to adopt what does mechanical license even mean in the internet. What does performance license means? And these are unclear terms that we have to redefine them in the new environment that we're in. That's my opinion.
So thanks. In Soundverse, you're mainly focusing on keeping a record and making the transparency and tradability, obtaining licenses and keeping record of it, but are also thinking about enforcement layers as well. For example, I can think of a spectrum from using something like a content ID that platforms can choose to report, just like OpenSea chooses to respect royalty, secondary sale royalties, for example, and seeing how pushing platforms to enforce those reporting and enforcement of the licenses, and all the way to like token gatings, like having the platforms themselves require the owner of the license to connect with the wallet that obtains a license for that specific use of whether it's streaming or reusing of the content, whatever the license is for.
I think enforcement is not what we are trying to do, but we are trying to be aligned with other players down the line, that if someone owns the NFT of a music, they can import it and they can use it without dealing with without the platform risking to get sued. That's the vision that we think we want to see in the future.
Definitely, I think that's like the elephant in the room. Eventually, when you think of the big, labels and players who want to get the reason they're scared of decentralization is that they want to have somebody that they can sue eventually. If somebody's, they want to have a finger to point. So if you create the tools for platforms to be agnostic and say, like, we report back, or we keep record, or we enforce what we are told, and we just give a layer for for bigger players to choose if they want to enforce or not. Permissionless could also mean permission to protect your content more than other, Web3 native artists would be. So I think opening, like thinking how we can utilize, NFTs for use cases where there are still, a supply chain, because eventually artists themselves, it will be great if we create tools to onboard artists that can own their own content, but a lot of artists still need managers and labels to manage their assets, and then they have to protect their IP basically, as because they're a business construct.
Like, think about it. One of the reasons we think these people who claiming middleman gonna go away, artists gonna own everything, it doesn't make sense. It's because I've been interacting with a lot of artists because of our previous startup in music industry. Artists are creative people. They're not marketing people. They're not business people. And this is not something you can onboard from one day to another. You need a lot of negotiation. You need a lot of talks. You need a lot of fee negotiations with the clubs. Otherwise, if you don't have these people to go do this for you, then you leave a lot of money on the table and you end up doing nothing. And I see a lot of them, a lot of artists who claiming, no, we're going to be on ourselves and so on and so forth. But reality is you need contacts, you need network in the business. And if you have this network of people, you're going to be able to grow your audience and grow your brand. And that's important for artists. Those who understand it, they're willing to play along, and they play the smart, and they grow their audience eventually. Those who try to keep everything for themselves, I haven't seen them growing so much. And that's very few do, but at least I think, as we know in the startup world, a team together is very much powerful in the long term rather than a single person, because the skills come together and make bigger impact. And so artists would need these people along the line, and that's the reality of it.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So a couple of questions. First, you didn't share the structures or maybe the signatures that you're using to signify a license, or what a license looks like on your platform. I would really love to see what it looks like, how you're currently designing it. And so the difference between like the master and the license, I would love to see how you're currently thinking about it. Then maybe you can share it if it's okay. And second is, if nobody has other questions, is do you have any specific asks from the builder community here for either types of integration or anything else?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for us to building forward is the legal challenges. That's a big one. And I believe Stephanie, she has pretty good experience with Sony. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie. And we have a lot of these experiences can be shared to really make legal side look clean when we go forward. And the more of this conversation we have, the more organized we can point out what are the problems that someone can come up with the answers, either their lawyers or some other people who have experience, the faster we're gonna be forward in the road. And that's my question, that's my request. Let's be open, let's be focused and engaged to solve and trigger this for all of us, that we can move forward.
Yeah, you should check out also the Web3 Music Coalition if you don't know them yet. Kyle, I forget his last name, but I can introduce you.
Kyle Smith.
Kyle Smith, yeah. The Web3 Music Coalition, they have a lot of legal expertise in NFT space. And then I think also, I think Sound XYZ or Catalog also part of that forum. So they definitely have a lot of experience. They have
LexDAO. If you
LexDAO channel.
So LexDAO is interesting, but it's not pure legal advice. It is a bunch of people that are very much interested in this idea, and some of them are interns, etc. But it's still an interesting conversation. My ask would be maybe with all the forces that already currently exist in this room, Stephanie and Bruno and a bunch of other people that have the resources, is maybe we can try to have the next conversation to include maybe part of it will be splits design, but the other part might be legal design of maybe licensing and different, traps, etc. And we can bring tough questions. Maybe we can have a few lawyers, attorneys, people that are experts in this area to help us figure out some of the tough questions that we're probably all going to be facing one day or maybe even today. But that's my ask. I don't know if Stephanie, if you can hear, or Gilad or Bruno or
Hey.
anyone else here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I definitely think we need to bring the legal aspect to these conversations. So I'm just talking to a few attorneys and see, who's available, who's got the time and the bandwidth. They're all getting snapped up to be part of boards of startups. So, and they're very strict about not having any competing interests. So, it's definitely a conversation we need to have now.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. So I think we're at the end. Any final questions for Mersad before we go? Oh, Mersad, did you want to show? Do you have something to show, or do you not want to show?
I shared the link also in the. Let me show you something.
The design of the contracts of the
Oh,
license.
I don't have them now because it's with my CTO, but I can. We can connect and we
Wonderful.
can.
And maybe we can put it in the Telegram group. Maybe other people will be interested. Whatever you can feel you can share publicly. But
Sure.
since it's going to be smart contracts, so you're probably going to share them as open source anyway to get people trusting, then it's usually not a big issue in terms of the public design.
Sure.
So I would be very interested in that. And also that conversation with the 5553, I think would be very interesting. Any
Sure.
final questions for Mersad? Okay, cool. Well, I think as the first experiment, as far as I'm concerned, I'm really happy, but I'm very biased. But thank you very much for everybody for joining. We will try to do this every 2 weeks, so twice a month. And every time we're going to try to get different people to talk, or same people on different subjects. Next time we'll try to do the split stuff, etc. But I hope that we are building this. We're building a builder community that we can all talk together and share the pain and the success, etc. And sometimes, voice and video is just better than chat. So I hope this was useful to everybody else as much as it was for me. And I hope to see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll also share the recording. Thank you to Ivan and Mersad and to Bruno and to Maurice. And see you next time, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.